Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, so today we're tackling something that I think is on everyone's minds these days, and that's, how to stay ahead of the curve in industries that just seem to change at like warp speed.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's something that I'm constantly thinking about.
Right, and we actually came across this fascinating article on career development.
Hmm.
It had some really interesting points. And I think, we kind of want to break those down for you, give you some practical advice that you can actually use.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about making this stuff actionable, right? Because, we can talk about theories all day, but if you can't actually implement it in your own life, it's not really that helpful.
Exactly. So we kind of distilled it down to five key takeaways that we want to discuss today.
Hmm.
And I think one of them in particular really stood out to me as like this game changer for how to think about your career. So we'll get to that one.
Woohoo, a little bit of a teaser, all right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's start with the first one, which might sound kind of obvious, but it's embrace lifelong learning. And I think people hear that and they're like, ugh, okay, got to go back to school, get another degree.
Yeah, no, not necessarily.
No, it's not about that.
I mean, it's really about cultivating this mindset of like continuous growth and curiosity, right? You're not, you're never done learning no matter what field you're in because everything is evolving so rapidly.
That's so true. Like what what are some skills that you think are becoming like essential now that maybe weren't even on the radar 5 or 10 years ago?
Oh gosh. I mean, it depends on the field, but I think just generally speaking, data literacy, right? Being able to understand and work with data is becoming increasingly important regardless of what you do. And then there's also this whole, conversation around AI and how that's going to change the landscape of work.
Totally.
And so learning about that, even if you're not like a tech person, just having some basic understanding of what it is and how it works, it's going to be really valuable.
Absolutely. And I think that ties in perfectly with our next point, which is be adaptable.
Oh, yes.
It's like you're a mental gymnast.
Right, exactly. You got to be flexible.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be flexible with all these like twists and turns.
Because things are going to change. You might have a plan, but that plan might need to pivot.
Right.
And so being comfortable with that uncertainty and being willing to kind of like roll with the punches, I think is really important.
And we saw this happen in real time, during the pandemic.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So many companies had to adapt so quickly to remote work.
To a completely new way of operating. And some of them did it really well and some of them struggled. And I think a lot of it came down to that adaptability.
Totally. And I think, another industry that's had to adapt like crazy is the publishing industry.
Oh, yeah.
They went from like, physical books to ebooks to audiobooks. Now it's like all this online content. It's a whole different world.
And they're still, figuring it out, right? There's no like end point. It's just this constant evolution.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So how do we even know what to learn, what to adapt to? And that brings us to, I think, a really important tip that's often misunderstood, which is network with innovators.
Yes. Connect with the people who are pushing the boundaries in your field.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people think of networking as like, oh, I got to go to these like stuffy events and, try to hand out my business card.
No, no, it's not about that.
Yeah, it's not about that at all. It's
Yeah.
more about like finding the thought leaders that you admire,
Yeah.
the people who are doing the work that you find really inspiring
Right.
and like following their work, engaging with their ideas.
And you can do that online.
Exactly.
LinkedIn is great for that.
Yeah.
Industry-specific forums. There's so many places where you can connect with these people virtually, and you don't even have to like have a deep conversation. You can just start by following them, commenting on their posts, you know, engaging with their content.
That's such a good point. And I'm already picturing myself like, crafting the perfect LinkedIn comment to like get noticed.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's not about getting noticed necessarily,
yeah.
but it's about like showing that you're interested in the same things that they are and that you're, part of that conversation.
Totally. All right. So next tip. This one I think a lot of us struggle with. It's experiment with new ideas.
Yeah. And it can feel risky.
It's scary to put yourself out there like, what if it fails?
Oh, absolutely. But I think the key is to reframe failure as a learning opportunity.
I love that.
Right? It's not about like, oh, I messed up and now I'm done. It's about like, okay, what did I learn from this?
Right.
How can I apply that to my next attempt? And some of the more successful people in the world have had tons of failures along the way.
That's a good point. Have you had any like professional experiments that maybe didn't go as planned, but you learned something valuable from?
Oh gosh, so many.
Right.
I mean, I think early on in my career, I was so afraid to make mistakes. And so I would kind of play it safe and not really put myself out there.
Oh, yeah.
And then I realized that I wasn't really growing.
Mm.
And so I started to take more risks. And some of them played off and some of them didn't. But I learned so much from the ones that didn't that it was worth it.
I love that. And I think, we can all relate to that fear of failure, but it's really about like shifting that perspective.
Right, exactly. And seeing it as part of the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So now for the big one, the tip that our source really emphasized as like the most crucial, which is monitor industry trends.
Yeah, stay ahead of the curve.
It's like having a crystal ball almost.
Right, because if you can see what's coming down the pipeline,
Yeah.
you can start to prepare for it. You can start to develop the skills that are going to be in demand. You can start to position yourself to take advantage of those opportunities.
Totally. So like, what are some practical ways to do that?
Well, there are tons of great resources out there, industry publications, newsletters, podcasts, even just following the right people on social media can give you a lot of insight into what's happening in your field. And it doesn't have to be like this overwhelming thing. You don't have to spend hours and hours every day reading every article.
Right.
Just start with like one or two sources that you find really valuable and make it a habit to check in with them regularly.
I love that. Okay, so to recap, we've talked about embracing lifelong learning, being adaptable, networking with innovators, experimenting with new ideas, and monitoring industry trends.
And I think the key takeaway here is that all of these things are interconnected, they work together.
Yeah.
Being adaptable helps you to embrace lifelong learning, monitoring industry trends, helps you to experiment with new ideas. It's all part of this bigger picture of staying ahead of the curve.
And it's not just about reacting to change, it's about proactively shaping the future.
Exactly. Taking control of your career and making sure that you're not just surviving, but thriving.
So my challenge to you is to pick one of these tips, maybe the one that resonated with you the most, and commit to implementing it this week.
Yeah, just one small step.
See what happens.
You might be surprised at the difference it makes.
Awesome advice. All right, everyone, that's our deep dive for today. Keep that curiosity burning, embrace the adventure of your career journey, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.